Namaste, good evening to everyone. Namaste, Dr. Bamra, and to all the attendees. I speak to you from India on behalf of the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, a leading center for yoga studies established in Chennai by renowned yoga master TKV Desikachar, son and long-term student of Yogi Shri Krishnamacharya. On this occasion of the 10th International Day of Yoga, there are two things that I would like to call attention to throw the spotlight on. One is a fairly concerning situation where when we speak of yoga for the most part seems to be showcased predominantly as asana. And when we have requests for us to teach someone yoga, typically they say, do you also teach meditation? Or would you teach me yoga and meditation? And this is problematic because yoga is dhyanam. The very definition of yoga in the Yoga Sutra is chitta vritti nirodha. And it is a capacity to direct your mind towards a chosen object, to sustain that without distraction for a certain period of time. Now, if yoga is dhyanam, it culminates in a state of samadhi. Yoga essentially is sadhana, leading us to a higher spiritual purpose. In this, there is no doubt as far as the Shastra is concerned. But sadly, meditation per se has been moved out of the purview of yoga and is treated as a separate domain, with asana being predominantly associated with yoga. Now, one thing that is essential, that as we celebrate yoga, as the world comes together in the practice of yoga, as so many citizens across so many countries come together to practice the common yoga protocol, what we must not forget are the roots of yoga. That yoga comes from Bharatiya Samskriti, from a culture that is as old as it is of primary importance. This is the culture that has given so much of knowledge to the world. And I think it is time for practitioners across the world, to reclaim yoga as sadhana, to reclaim yoga as coming from traditional Vedic roots, and to speak of this proudly, to speak of this authentically, that while yoga is rooted in the Vedic culture, in its application, in the practice of yoga, there are no limitations to who practices, no barriers by way of gender or caste or community or nationality or race or religion. Because as my teacher would always say, as Shri Krishnamacharya would say, the only eligibility to practice yoga is a commitment, is simply being alive. All you need to do is being able to breathe. And there is a possibility of adapting so many tools. I think we need to move away from this preoccupation with asana, with form. I'm not denying the importance. The asanas are vital. They play tremendous roles of great significance in health and wellness, fitness, flexibility, stamina. All of this is a given. But asana is one of an array of tools, of a bouquet of tools, all of which point or lead us stage by stage to culminate in dhyanam. Eventually, it is dhyanam that is the goal of yoga. And why is this needed? Because I think we are living in a time of tremendous stress, of so much burden, financially, commercially. We see across the world so much too that is a source of worry. And if we are to face up, if we are able to rise up to these challenges, increasing challenges coming from changing environmental scenarios across the world, food has changed, lifestyles have changed, job roles have changed. In such a situation, what can give us the capacity to endure, to go through life's challenges, would be a mind that is able to be rooted in samatva. And we have to move towards that, towards inculcating dhyanam, towards reclaiming sadhana, and to proclaim that the entirety of yoga tools of asana, pranayama, mudra, bandha, nyasam, mantra, japa, and dhyanam, apart from yatra, ahara niyama, vihara niyama, achara, vichara, all of this comes together in the Ashtanga of Patanjali. And it is this that is entirely emergent from Bharatiya Samskriti. And I think it is important to showcase this and to re-establish yoga in its roots, practiced in India or across the world. Secondly, when we are looking at yoga in the Western world, what we are also focusing on, I would say, is a studio culture. Yoga has been equated to being a set of practices for fitness. Like you go to a Pilates class or a Zumba class, people go to a yoga class, and this has funded a multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide. But I think also as we move to the 10th International Day of Yoga, from stopping, just practicing on this day, or from a practice that is so centric on form, if we can explore the functionality of yoga, because yoga, while at the highest level is sadhana, no doubt, are we eligible for the sadhana is another question, because kaivalyam, liberation, these are far goals. Are we yet ready? Is a larger question. This is the question that Sri Krishnamacharya and Sri Desikachar keep at the forefront in their vision. They were of the opinion that when a bare minimum foundation of health and wellness is not available to everyone, where is the question of higher sadhana? And so increasingly, I think there is a need to explore the role of yoga as yoga chikitsa, the application of yoga in the context of therapy. And while many people, many teachers who go through a structured teacher training may label themselves as yoga therapists, I think more formalized training is needed. At the KYM, we have almost a 900-hour teacher training course that is foundation for another 900-hour therapist training course. So this is an intense study where we are attempting to understand how the tools of yoga can be offered to anyone. That the tool, the adaptation of the tools based on the place of residence, based on time of practice, based on profession, based on age, status in their life, where they are in their lives. What is the desire of the practitioner? What are the aspirations? What is the capacity of the practitioner? When you factor all of this in, you see that yoga applied as therapy has very, very far-reaching implications. Let me just quickly tell you why this is so. Because I think we have been through several threats. One is the prevalence of lifestyle-induced disorders, diabetes, hypertension, metabolic disorders, respiratory disorders. All of this is known. But increasingly so, there are certain, you could say, threats. Number one, in the area of fertility. Increasingly across the world, we see fertility dropping, that there are more and more assisted reproduction centers being established, not the case even 10 years or 20 years ago. And so this is something of serious importance that we need to look at. Secondly, the growing threat of psychological distress. Across the world, we see that younger and younger populations are becoming increasingly vulnerable to psychological distress. Children as young as 4 or 5 seek counseling or even are under medication from psychiatrists. Thirdly, because of inappropriate lifestyles, inappropriate practices with regard to sleep, sedentary lifestyle habits, lack of awareness about food, we also see that the next generation is affected. So many children on the autism spectrum. I think this was unheard of. Again, 20 years ago, we didn't have this prevalence of children with special needs. This is increasing. And yet another concern worldwide is an aging population that is highly subject or highly vulnerable to Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's. And in all these conditions, you see that rising healthcare costs, this is prohibitive. That where will we go? How will we provide? In affluent countries where people have access to medical technology and to caregivers, then maybe where there is affordability, you could manage with a caregiver. But the majority of the world's population does not have access to such care, or to be able to afford a caregiver. Even in India, we see that there are many aging populations in rural, semi-rural, semi-urban areas where care is very expensive. And so given all these areas, these are significant threats. These are areas where yoga interventions can be very timely as preventive healthcare. You can preempt such conditions. And even when there is a propensity for such conditions, I think yoga integrated approaches within the healthcare setup, if there is a dialogue between the medical fraternity and yoga and Ayurveda practitioners, then so much can be given where you center the care seeker at the crux of interventions. Because in the absence of such individual and collective wellness, then I think, all that we celebrate in the name of yoga and yoga practices is redundant if that practice of yoga cannot bestow on practitioners that fundamental holistic wellness at a physiological and psychological level. And therefore, I think that going ahead, this should be the dialogue, this should be the narrative of how we can integrate approaches rather than the medical fraternity setting us apart as, fraudulent or even quackery. This is not the case. Yoga is solidly rooted in knowledge. It is not quackery. There is a science behind how the tools are applied. And when interventions are done in such an integrated manner, tremendous possibilities for health and wellness are there. I myself have I've collaborated with senior Vaidyas in Ayurvedic Vaidyas, and we have seen great results through the pandemic. Through the COVID pandemic, we've seen tremendous results. And this remains the case in the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, which is a very leading center of yoga therapy, where we see upwards of 20,000 care seekers year on year. All of these care seekers are met one-on-one. And I have tremendous data points to show the importance of yoga and how yoga needs to be integrated into mainstream healthcare. So with these 2 points, I conclude this, just a summary of some of my thoughts on this IDY, and my gratitude to Dr. Bamra for this platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, very enlightening presentation. So, Alison, nice to see you here from the British Complementary Medical Association. Nice to see you here, Susie. Nice to see you here. Many other individuals. So Susie, we need to bring this sort of thought into our British Complementary Medical Association. So instead of just accepting any old, application that's coming from, some one-man band or one-woman band, and they're doing this. So, we really need to raise the bar and really look at research on the thoughts, that Nrithya ji has shared with us. She is in charge of one of the most prosperous and leading academic institutions on yoga in India. So I hope at some stage we can talk about this. Susie, you as well in Ireland, yeah, we need to get on this act and raise the bar so that so we really sort of have more deep programs in the future. I know we have with us very patient Dr. Polishetty sitting with us, but I'm not going to ask him to come on yet because he's sort of working in India till like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. So we'll just have to wait a little bit more while, if you don't mind. So can I please invite Dr. Batra ji? Dr. Batra is Mr. Homeopathy. He is a world authority on homeopathy, based in Bombay. Very delighted that on this occasion, you could join us. So, Dr. Batra, would you just like to share your experience, with the homeopathy and yoga and all the preventative medicine for the next 3 minutes, please? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amarjeet Singh. You call and I come wherever you ask me to come.